it was such a great job working with Ben, being, you know, his assistant. Gary Summers was his assistant at the same time. And Ben would basically just say, you've looked at the movie, go out and see what you can find in the world to record that you might think might apply to this.
Yeah.
And we knew that we needed some kind of articulated, syncopated, big mechanical sound for the walkers.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, before the internet, I used the yellow pages a lot. And so I would just think, okay, big machines. Where might there be big machines making, ka-chunk ka-chunk sounds that I could record? And I thought, well, okay, metal working facilities of some kind. And I found these places in Berkeley and Oakland that had these things called metal shears. Mm-hmm. And some of them were, as big as a school bus, and sheets of metal would be fed through them, and then a kind of in a guillotine action, it would slice the sheets of metal into whatever length they decided that they needed. And there was a lot of pneumatic action in it. So there were various kinds of that kind of thing. And along with the ka-chunks, and it was really kind of musical and interesting and syncopated. And I thought, wow, I've hit pay dirt with this one. And
yeah.
And as soon as Ben heard the recordings, he said, "Yep, that's it."
Yeah, no, I love some of the stuff that went into that scene, like some of the big. You start thinking in terms of things in the real world that are, big and mechanical and metal, like oil derricks and garbage truck motors and things like that. That must have been very, very helpful for bringing those to life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also did production sound on Rumblefish, Coppola film, and Never Cry Wolf.
Yes, I wanted to talk about Never Cry Wolf because we are humbled to have Alan and Anne's quarter-inch library in the archives of the Hollywood Sound Museum, which we're guarding for posterity. What was it like to work with Alan? I mean, he's such a true artist, also.
Yeah, another way that I was unbelievably lucky was I found myself in the San Francisco area within 20 miles of Walter Murch and Ben Burt and Alan Splett, who were kind of leading this charge in the 1970s and early 80s in this kind of renaissance of film sound.
Yes.
Obviously excellent work is done in film sound, everywhere and in every era, but I think it's undeniable that there was this new movement, largely started by the movie brat directors, yes. All of whom were interested in rock and roll and sound in general. And so I got to basically apprentice to Walter and Ben and Alan, and working with Alan was, beyond special. He's, all three of those people, and I think anybody who does good sound work is musical in some sense, if only in the sense of having a kind of feel for timing. A lot of the great sound effects editors and what we now call sound designers were percussionists.
Sure. Jimmy McDonald is one that comes to mind immediately that I'm a huge fan of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Ben Burt was a bit of a drum player too.
Right.
But Alan was a musician, a cellist. And when I think of his work, I tend to think mostly of the ambiances.
Yes, absolutely.
He was just wonderful at creating this kind of sea of sounds for the story to float in. But he and Anne also did such amazing work on specific effects, like I think of the horse related sounds in the Black Stallion. Anybody who wants to be a sound effects editor or a sound designer has to watch the Black
Black
Stallion.
Stallion. It's an absolutely brilliant job. And like the first more than half of the film is there's no dialogue in it whatsoever. And
Yeah,
it's just absolutely beautiful soundtrack. No, it's one of my
yeah,
favorites.
yeah,
Absolutely. And he won an Oscar for it, of course.
yeah. He did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's very cool.
but he couldn't attend.
Yeah, that's right. As Johnny Carson
Kept joking.
noticed right away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story too. That's one of the beautiful things about sound is that yeah, you can find something with the right feel and the right emotional content, but it could be completely different than the real thing, which is why it's not always smart to tell the director what the actual sound is or not, because it might start clouding their own judgment about it. Have you run into any instances like that?
Oh yeah, sure. I was working on a film that had a nuclear power plant in it, and nuclear power plants tend to sound pretty boring. They're basically just industrial sites, and so you get the usual sorts of hums and buzzes and hisses, etc. Not
Yeah.
very interesting. But uh, there was a broken or malfunctioning water cooler in the hallway outside the manager's office.
Oh wow.
And I recorded that, and it made this really weird squealing sound. And so I used that as the sinister sound for the nuclear power plant. And I made the mistake of telling the director
Yeah.
that's what it was. And
Yeah. Didn't believe it after that, right? It
that's
didn't
right.
work. Didn't work for him.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And but he loved it before he knew what it was.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not really a tech guy, but I hear everyone talking about plugins and all these, these different apps for manipulating sounds. And coming from the old school quarter-inch tape archiving and cutting on film and all that, I still feel like I'm sort of a throwback, just, occasionally speeding something up or slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you feel the same way pretty much, I understand.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost all, there are some exceptions, but almost all people who do any craft, uh, doesn't matter whether it's uh, carpentry or sound design.
Mhm.
Um, when you're young and trying to learn the trade and trying to impress people with how much you know and with what gear you have, etc., you tend to think, the more stuff, the more gear, the more plugins I have, the better, and the more powerful I'll be, and help me conquer the world of sound design. The
Right.
longer you do it, the fewer and fewer tools you tend to use.
Yeah.
And it's not because you're lazy. I think it's because you're more focused on what actually needs to be done, and more focused, especially on the story, and less focused on showing your prowess in manipulating things.
Right.
So, yeah, almost every great mixer that I talk to, every great sound designer tells me I use far fewer tools now than I did when I was younger.
Yeah.